This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, with my very special guest today, Elizabeth Windsor, who goes by the handle of Agent Ladybug. She is a good friend of Judith Very Baker. She has led a rather unusual life, and she has a lot to share with us today. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Yes, hello there, James Fetzer. It's wonderful to be on your program. Professor Fetzer, I've admired your stance in writing the books Murder at Dealey Plaza, and I see that you've spent your whole lifetime trying to find the culprits.
Yeah, it is amazing how much of my life has been devoted to this sort of thing since 1992, when I organized a research group to study the assassination of JFK. The best qualified individuals who ever tackled that case. I have been very much involved with research on JFK, on 9/11, on the death of Senator Paul Wellstone, and a host of related issues. And of course, during that period, I've come to know and greatly admire Judith Very Baker, and who, of course, had a relationship with Lee Oswald in New Orleans before he moved back to Dallas, where he would find employment at the Texas School Book Depository and be set up as the patsy to take the fall for the assassination of JFK. We can start anywhere you like, Elizabeth, but talking about Judith might be one place. How did you come to know her?
Well, what happened was I heard about Judith Very Baker coming to Toronto to speak at a book signing, and I wanted to meet her because I have a direct link to the assassination of JFK myself. My brother was one of the particular individuals that have been in the history books there as driving a station wagon that was seen at Dealey Plaza in the back, in the parking lot. It was seen by various people because it had a particular bumper sticker that said Barry Goldwater for president. So when I heard about Judith Very Baker speaking at Conspiracy Cultures, a bookstore in Toronto at Queen and Roncesvalles, I wanted to be there to meet her, and then just to run by her what I knew, just to validate her book as well, that Oswald was the patsy.
Elizabeth, the driver you mentioned was related to you how again?
My brother.
Your brother. Older brother, younger brother?
Only brother.
Only brother.
He's older than I am.
Yeah. And his name may well differ from yours. What is his name?
He's now supposedly dead. I found that out through the internet. His real name is Roland Otis. Middle name is Lembit. Roland is spelled Roland, and he was also the Raoul.
The Raoul. He was also known by that nickname?
That's right.
How old was he? How old was he?
Born in 1940.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
He was born in 1940?
Yeah, he was born in 1944.
44.
And, yeah, in 1956, we entered from Montreal into the province of Ontario to live in Toronto. And lo and behold, I go to a public school that has the two of the I don't know if the other the one that actually you can see on the Zapruder film is a fellow by the name of Walter Tabinski, and Walter Tabinski is that elusive other Oswald that the CIA had photographed in Mexico City.
Really?
And you can actually see the picture of him in the movie JFK, because they bring it out in a table session.
You're talking about the kind of big, bulky guy with short hair that sort of sticks up like a military cut?
Yeah, he's a military. He was actually trained, and if you go into the book that Robert Groden wrote, it's a picture book.
The Killing of a President.
The picture of Walter Tabinski. He's standing right beside Lee Harvey Oswald. It's on page 18 and 19 in the book it's called The Search for Lee Harvey Oswald by Robert J. Groden.
Yes.
And it's a picture that is of the Civil Air Patrol. It has Ferry, who I've met as well. I've met them all. I met various individuals, including Ferry and Clay Bertrand, or Clay Shaw, as he's known, and various individuals. And I lived with the shortest tramp, who was ex-Naval Intelligence CIA by the name of Charles Frederick Rogers. He's the shortest tramp. Now, in the movie JFK, you don't see his actual picture. They've put an actor in there, but you do see Walter Tabinski's actual picture. It's in the film JFK by
Oliver Stone.
Oliver Stone. So I saw that they made a major wrong move by not actually having the pictures of the tramps shown in the film as well. It would have helped considerably with people coming forward that might have known Charles Frederick Rogers as well. So when I met him, the first time was in 1966, just in the month of December, November, December. He had come over, and then in 1967, he was living with my brother in Toronto on a street called Vaughan Road. And he helped, actually, Charles Frederick Rogers helped me move to Montreal for a year. I moved there. So for the record, everyone should know that I actually knew a lot of the participants at the Dealey Plaza. This is
astonishing, Elizabeth. How did you meet all these people? How did you meet David Ferry, for example?
Well, it was all to do with this Walter Tabinski. Walter Tabinski was actually groomed by Ferry and some of the others. He did a confession. It's in a book called Appointment in Dallas.
Yes.
Where he spoke that he was one of the individuals that was training in Florida for the Cuban invasion. And he was part of the Cuban invasion. So he had a grudge against Kennedy for the fact of the backup not being there and leaving all the individuals that were stranded. There was no air backup or anything in Cuba.
Well, this really was the CIA's manipulation, and JFK had never promised what they claimed he promised, and the whole thing was intended to smear him and pin the tail on JFK, which, of course, they succeeded admirably.
Right. Now, what he explained as well, he's a mercenary. He's a paid killer. He was trained as a military operation person, and that's how they all knew each other. The fellow by the name of Charles Frederick Rogers was Naval Intelligence. He was also CIA. So they were all friends. You could see that in the picture. They've never really identified the individuals in that photograph, but that's when I first met Walter Tabinski. That photograph was in 1955 that shows Lee Harvey Oswald and David Ferry together, but they're side by side. If you take a look at the picture of Oswald, it's on the far right. The next one over is Walter Tabinski. He's also the fellow that's in that shot, like I was mentioning, that was taken by the CIA in Mexico City.
Well, during
the other also.
During the break, Elizabeth, I'll grab my copy of the book and we can talk about this and some more in relation to the photographs. But you were living in New Orleans at the time?
No, I wasn't living in New Orleans. I was living in Toronto. But I was, how I met this Walter Tabinski, the first day that I met him, the man was trying to kill me. I was only 10 years old. So I don't forget these things lightly.
Why in the world would Walter Tabinski?
What happened was his cousin, who's the shooter at Dealey Plaza, who did the headshot from the area of the grassy knoll. There's a cement embankment that's just in front of the grassy knoll. That's where he was positioned. And he did the headshot. Now, this guy was trained. His name is Clyde Alfred John Forshaw, born September the 10th, 1943. And he has been a long-standing hitman, contract killer, whatever you want to call him, murder for hire individual that's been doing a lot of the unsolved murders. And they set up this patsy system where the first murder that I saw Clyde commit in our backyard at 45 Marlborough was of a little boy by the name of Wayne Morris. And I'll never forget this as long as I live, because I saw from then forward, I don't know how many murders committed by Clyde Forshaw. He was a trained killer, and that's where they sort of groomed this Manchurian candidate. They set up individuals after individuals. So they set up the first. The first fellow that was set up that I knew of was this Peter Woodcock, and he ended up spending most of his time in an insane asylum, taking the meat, or carrying the meat, or whatever the convicts call, taking the brunt of a murder that he's never committed. It was of a little girl by the name of Carol Voice. She's 4 years old, and it was in January '57. And the one that I saw in our backyard was a little boy, like I said, his name was Wayne Morris. Previous to that was a other little boy by the name of Millette, last name. So there was never a trial for these two boys, but there was of the girl, and the judge didn't even understand. He pleaded innocent. He just happened to have seen the murder, and he went into that area below this Bloor Viaduct, and then actually touched or looked at the body, was lured there as a patsy, just like Oswald was. That's the way the system works. These individuals that are hired killers have an agenda. They do approximately 20 to 25 routine, concrete ways of eluding the authorities. Setting up an alibi, stalking your prey. It goes on and on, but finding a patsy or a fall guy is part of their agenda so that they never take the rap for the crime. And what he's learned to do is he uses latex gloves or gloves of some kind. He usually never leaves any kind of evidence behind, physical evidence, because he wears everything from keeping his bodily hairs. He shaves his hairs daily off of his whole body, so you don't find, these paid killers don't leave physical evidence, forensic evidence behind. But they do know how to set somebody up by getting someone who they set up as a patsy, their physical evidence, and they plant it on the body. That's the way these paid killers work.
Well, tell me about
anyway,
yeah. Tell me about
what happened was,
go ahead.
How I met this Walter Tabinski was my dad, seeing that this body was left, this little boy's body was left in our backyard, and we were supposed to take the rap. My dad and my uncle brought the body to Lake Ontario. The next day my brother brought me to Clyde Forshaw's house, where I saw Walter Tabinski. That's that other Oswald in Mexico City. I'll repeat that again so that people know. He was sitting in the kitchen. That was the first time I saw him. When I walked in, I never felt such evil in all my life as when I walked in there. I felt frightened looking at the man. He looked exactly like the picture there that was taken of the Civil Air Patrol with Ferry and Oswald and Tabinski together. That was 55. That was a year later. So that's what he looked like. Now, as I was staring at him, he was staring at me, and then I was lured into a ravine at the age of 10, and he was on a bridge, and he tried to wipe me out with a sniper rifle. In Toronto, he was known as the elusive sniper. So all the unsolved murders that were ongoing, there was a lot of the ones that were done, a lot of the patsies were hung. One of the cases that they were perpetrating or whatever was this case of a fellow that there was a book written on him, Until You Are Dead, and it's about Truscott, if you've ever heard of Stephen Truscott. It's another patsy that they set up. And he did time. He finally was let out, but they got rid of capital punishment here in Canada because of Stephen Truscott. The authorities knew that he had not done it. But everything has been done to never bring Tabinski or Clyde Forshaw or any of the particulars that were in the Dealey Plaza to justice, because they did a deal. These are paid killers that work for CIA. People don't seem to get the message. And when you see the film by Oliver Stone, you'll hear the man, the actor is Donald Sutherland. He plays Prouty, who is a general. And Prouty
actually Colonel.
Says,
Colonel.
That's right. Well, the Colonel. Okay. What he says is that all of the assassins that were at Dealey Plaza will never be convicted for anything they do within their lifetime. That's the deal. People don't even hear it. They have to see the movie over and over to pick out bits and pieces of the evidence of this was a CIA operation all the way down the line.
You're saying they have a get out of jail free card. No matter what crime they commit, they won't be convicted.
Exactly. That's why you had an individual by the name of James Files come out, because he must have seen the movie JFK. He must have seen the book, The Search for Lee Harvey Oswald. These guys that are hitmen, they know who the other hitmen are, because they work with these godfathers, whether it's Sam Giancana or the individuals there, Johnny Verselli, Carlos Marcello, and on and on. So I met in the summer of 1967. They came to Canada, Ferry and Clay Shaw. They flew up, and why I met them in '67 is they were ready to take down their next victim, which was Martin Luther King. These are individuals that I guess the businessman or whatever, they deal of who goes down and why they want him down. I also met Jean de Mournchild. Jean de Mournchild said in her statement before the Senate subcommittee on the assassinations that the hitmen came from Canada, the wild boys from Canada. That was their statement. You can find it in the files. So she came to our house. That's how I met her. And I knew, I was young at the time as well, at the time of the assassination of Kennedy. I wasn't about to start fighting against, Nixon, the CIA. It goes on and on. When you hear the names and the individuals that are involved, Hoover and such, do you think you're going to fight back and get somewhere? So that's been my dilemma all my life. I've had to dodge bullets, watch for cars that have tried to run me over. I've been almost thrown over bridges, everything. For some odd reason, there's something that has been protecting me. I don't know what it is, but I think it's all the victims that, that have never had their voice heard ever, and they want the truth to come out. They don't want this thing to go down, that these people, just like at the end of the movie of JFK, where Garrison is saying, this might be a family affair. It might be that in 2029 that they'll continue this disclosure from any of the evidence from coming out, because they've sealed the files. Bits and pieces have come out through the years because there's a lot of people that are agitated about it, but you have to wonder how many years have people been meeting in Dallas and never does anything get done.
Well, in the wake of the resurgence of interest generated by Oliver Stone's film, Congress did pass a JFK Records Act that created a 5-person civilian panel known as the Assassination Records Review Board. While George Herbert Walker Bush, then president, adamantly opposed it, it nevertheless passed. He refused to appoint its members, which had to await the incoming Clinton administration. So there was a delay of 18 months, which basically telegraphed to the agencies they had time to get their files cleaned up. It nevertheless managed in declassifying some 60,000 documents and records from the CIA, the Secret Service, the FBI, and so forth. And we were beneficiaries of that in doing our research. One of the first documents that they released, Elizabeth, was one showing that Gerald Ford had the wound to JFK's back, which was actually 5.5 inches below the collar, just to the right of the spinal column at a downward angle, shallow, only went about as far as the second knuckle on your little finger. Redescribed from his uppermost back, which was already an exaggeration, to the base of the back of his neck, where it was supposed to be, therefore, the entry point for the magic bullet that allegedly passed through his neck without hitting any bony structures, exited his throat, went into the back of John Connolly, and all that. We know today, of course, that that's all rubbish. I actually presented a paper at Cambridge about this that was published in an international peer-reviewed journal you can find online under the heading Reasoning About Assassinations. But they released a whole lot of other documents and records, and they were very helpful, actually, for us in doing, well, Assassination Science came out in 1998, and the Gerald Ford release had already been chronicled in the New York Times, so I put a copy of the article there. And then in 2000, when Murder in Dealey Plaza was published, we had many, many more documents and records. And then by the time The Great Zapruder Film Hoax was published in 2003, even more, where Douglas Horn, who was the chief analyst, became the chief analyst for military records, has now published a 5-volume book in 2009 called Inside the ARRB, with a lot of stunning revelations Elizabeth, we're going to take our first break. I'm going to grab that book, and we will continue our conversation. I'll be right back.